Welcome back. Today's episode is about something that sounds almost too good to be true the first time you hear it, and yet it's backed by some of the most rigorous research in personal finance and behavioral economics. Here it is. A significant portion of Americans who retire with meaningful savings end up wealthier in their 70s and 80s than they were the day they retired. Let that sit for a second. These are people who've stopped working. They're no longer adding income. In many cases, they're drawing down from their retirement accounts, and yet their net worth is growing. How does that happen? And more importantly, how can you understand this well enough to make sure it happens to you? This isn't wishful thinking. It isn't a quirk of a bull market or an anomaly in a particular data set. It is a documented, repeatedly confirmed pattern in the retirement wealth literature. And when you understand the reasons behind it, it reveals something genuinely useful about how wealth works in the second half of life. So let's dig into the why. A landmark study by the Employee Benefit Research Institute, EBRI, tracking actual retirement spending and wealth patterns, found that a majority of retirees with significant savings, those entering retirement with $500,000 or more in assets, had higher real wealth 20 years into retirement than at the day of retirement. The researchers attributed this to a combination of continued investment compounding, spending that was lower than pre-retirement models assumed, Social Security income providing a reliable base, and the elimination of work-related expenses that freed up more capital than expected. Chapter 1. The important caveat. Who this applies to. Before we go any further, I want to be honest about who this phenomenon applies to, because the headline, "People get richer after retirement," can be misleading if taken without context, and I'd rather be accurate than just compelling. The pattern we're talking about is primarily documented among retirees who entered retirement with meaningful financial assets, typically defined in the research as a minimum of $200,000 to $500,000 in investable savings, though the pattern is strongest above $500,000. For this group, the combination of factors we're about to cover creates real, documented wealth growth in retirement. For retirees who enter with minimal savings and rely almost entirely on Social Security, the picture is very different. For them, retirement is genuinely a period of drawing down limited resources against rising healthcare costs. That's an entirely separate financial reality, and it's not what this episode is about. So what we're describing today is if you build meaningful retirement savings during your working years, which is what every episode in the series is designed to help you do, what happens to that wealth after you stop working can be genuinely surprising and genuinely encouraging. Let's look at why. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, analyzed by economists at Boston College's Center for Retirement Research, found that households in the top 2 wealth quintiles entering retirement showed positive real wealth growth in roughly 60% of cases over a 10-year retirement period, while households in the bottom 2 quintiles showed wealth decline in approximately 75% of cases. The divergence is stark and explains why the phenomenon of growing wealth in retirement is heavily concentrated among those who prepared adequately during their working years. Chapter 2. The 6 reasons wealth keeps growing after retirement. Reason number 1. Compound growth doesn't retire when you do. This is the most mathematically powerful force at work. When you retire with $800,000 in a diversified investment portfolio, the market doesn't receive a memo that you've stopped working. That $800,000 continues to earn returns, historically averaging around 7 to 8% after inflation over the long run for balanced portfolios. At 7%, that's approximately $56,000 in investment returns in the first year of retirement alone, appearing without any labor on your part. For many retirees with significant savings, their investment returns in the first several years of retirement actually exceed their total withdrawal for living expenses. If you're drawing $40,000 per year and your portfolio generates $56,000 in returns, the portfolio is growing net, even though you're withdrawing from it. This is the fundamental mathematical reason why adequately funded retirees can watch their net worth increase. Research by Wade Pfau and Michael Kitsis on the dynamics of retirement portfolio behavior found that retirees who entered retirement with portfolios above a certain threshold, approximately $500,000 in today's terms, and followed a sustainable withdrawal strategy, frequently ended the first decade of retirement with more real portfolio value than they started with even after withdrawals. The compound growth on a large base consistently outpaced moderate withdrawals in most historical market scenarios, particularly when the retiree maintained a meaningful equity allocation rather than shifting entirely to bonds upon retirement. This is one of the most important arguments for maintaining some equity exposure in retirement. Not all of it, but enough that compound growth continues to be a meaningful force in your financial life. A portfolio that's entirely in cash or bonds stops compounding at meaningful rates, and the protective power of growth against longevity risk disappears. Reason number 2. Spending drops more than almost everyone expects. Here's something the retirement planning industry doesn't advertise because it would undercut the urgency of their message. Most retirees spend significantly less than they expected to, not because they're depriving themselves, but because a large proportion of their pre-retirement spending was actually work-related, and it disappears the moment work does. Think about the full cost of working, commuting, gas, parking, public transit, car wear and tear, work wardrobe and dry cleaning, lunches out, professional memberships, continuing education costs, childcare for working parents, convenience food purchases driven by time scarcity, even the expensive coffee that gets you through a difficult Tuesday morning. These costs are real, recurring, and invisible in most pre-retirement budget projections because they blend into general spending. When work ends, they vanish. Research by David Blanchett at Morningstar, published as Estimating the True Cost of Retirement, found that actual retirement spending follows what he called a retirement spending smile, declining in real terms from the early active retirement years through the mid-retirement years, then rising again in late retirement due to healthcare costs. Crucially, Blanchett found that retirees consistently spent 10 to 20% less than pre-retirement spending models predicted during the first 15 years of retirement. For a household that pre-retirement projected $80,000 annual spending, actual spending averaged $64,000 to $72,000. The gap, $8,000 to $16,000 per year, compounds significantly over a decade of retirement. The practical implication: many retirees find that their income from Social Security, plus modest portfolio withdrawals, comfortably covers their actual spending, leaving more of the portfolio intact and compounding than their pre-retirement model suggested would be possible. Reason number 3. Work-related costs were bigger than anyone realized. Let's quantify this more specifically, because I think the numbers genuinely surprise people. The average American commuter spends approximately $8,500 per year on commuting-related expenses: fuel, parking, transit, vehicle maintenance amplified by commute miles. The average working adult spends $3,000 to $5,000 per year on work-appropriate clothing, grooming, and dry cleaning beyond what they'd otherwise spend. Lunches and workday convenience food add another $2,500 to $4,000 per year for many office workers. Professional dues, subscriptions, and tools required by the job, $500 to $2,000 more. Added up conservatively, and many workers are spending $12,000 to $18,000 per year on costs that exist solely because of their employment. Retirement eliminates these costs almost overnight. A retiree who stops commuting, stops buying business attire, and stops paying for the convenience services that time scarcity demanded during working life suddenly has $12,000 to $18,000 of annual cash flow that wasn't available before. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey data, analyzed by retirement researchers, confirms that households headed by adults aged 65 to 74 spend approximately 25% to 30% less annually than households headed by adults aged 45 to 54 with comparable pre-retirement incomes, even controlling for differences in housing, family size, and income. The largest reduction categories are transportation, food away from home, clothing, and work-related services. This spending reduction is not the result of financial hardship in most cases. It is the natural consequence of no longer needing the services and goods that employment demands. Reason number 4. Social Security income does something for a retirement portfolio that is underappreciated in most financial planning conversations. It dramatically reduces the amount you need to withdraw from the investment portfolio each month. And every dollar less you withdraw from the portfolio is a dollar that stays invested, compounding, growing. For a retiree receiving $2,200 per month from Social Security, the average 2024 benefit, that's $26,400 per year of income arriving reliably, inflation-adjusted, requiring zero withdrawals from the investment portfolio. If their total living expenses are $55,000 per year, they only need to withdraw $28,600 from their savings. On a $600,000 portfolio, that's a withdrawal rate of roughly 4.8%. Type, but the portfolio is still generating investment returns that partially offset the withdrawal. On an $800,000 portfolio, that's 3.6%, well within the range where the portfolio is likely growing net of withdrawals in most market scenarios. The Center for Retirement Research at Boston College found that the optimization of Social Security claiming strategy, specifically delaying claiming to maximize the benefit amount, was one of the most impactful financial decisions available to retirees, often worth $100,000 to $200,000 in additional lifetime benefits for married couples who strategized around spousal benefits. Retirees who successfully delay claiming to age 70, the maximum benefit point, where benefits are approximately 77% higher than at age 62, significantly reduce their portfolio withdrawal rates in early retirement, preserving more of their portfolio for later compounding. The retirees who grow wealthier in retirement almost universally make this claim timing decision deliberately and strategically. They bridge the gap between retirement and 70 with portfolio withdrawals, then replace those withdrawals with a permanently higher Social Security benefit that compresses their portfolio withdrawal rate going forward. Reason number 5. The mortgage is gone, and housing costs collapse. For many retirees who bought a home in their 30s or 40s, the 30-year mortgage is paid off by the time they're 60 to 70. The elimination of what was typically the largest single monthly expense, often $1,500 to $3,000 per month, creates an enormous positive cash flow shift at exactly the moment retirement begins. A $2,000 monthly mortgage payment represents $24,000 per year of income for a household that was projecting its retirement needs based on pre-retirement spending that included the mortgage. The elimination of that payment means $24,000 per year that doesn't need to be withdrawn from savings. Over a 20-year retirement, that's $480,000 in withdrawals that never happen, meaning the portfolio remains larger and continues compounding on a larger base throughout retirement. The Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances found that 79% of households headed by adults aged 65 to 74 who owned their primary residence owned it free and clear, without a mortgage. The median home equity for this age group exceeded $200,000. The elimination of mortgage debt combined with the asset value of the paid-off home represents one of the largest financial improvements in the transition to retirement for the average home-owning household. Research by economists at the Center for Retirement Research found that home ownership specifically, and mortgage-free home ownership in particular, was one of the strongest predictors of positive wealth growth trajectories in retirement. Reason number 6. Time enables smarter financial decision-making. This is the reason that surprises people most, but it's well documented in behavioral economics research. Retirees make better financial decisions than working-age adults, not because they're more intelligent, but because they have time. And time, it turns out, is one of the most powerful inputs into sound financial decision-making. During working years, most financial decisions are made under time pressure, cognitive load from work responsibilities, stress from competing demands, and the low-grade financial anxiety that comes from variable income and unpredictable expenses. Under these conditions, people make worse financial choices. They impulse buy, they don't comparison shop, they pay more for convenience, they don't optimize their bills and subscriptions, they don't negotiate, and they certainly don't have the time to think carefully about tax optimization, investment allocation, or estate planning. Retirement eliminates most of these conditions. The retiree who has sufficient financial resources has time to comparison shop, to cook at home, to call the insurance company and negotiate a better rate, to review every subscription and cancel the ones they don't use, to think carefully about their investment allocation, and to plan their taxes strategically. Research by economists Anna Maria Lusardi and colleagues on financial decision-making quality found that time pressure was one of the most consistent predictors of poor financial choices, even among financially literate individuals. When decision time was constrained, participants made systematically worse choices about savings, investment allocation, and debt management, regardless of their financial knowledge. This suggests that the retirement transition, by removing time constraints, enables a quality of financial decision-making that was structurally unavailable during working years. The retirees who grow wealthier in retirement aren't doing anything exotic. They're cooking more meals at home. They're calling to renegotiate their cable bill. They're actually reading their investment statements. They're thinking carefully about when to claim Social Security. They're spending an afternoon comparison shopping for insurance. These activities seem small individually, but they compound over years into thousands or tens of thousands of dollars of better financial outcomes, all enabled by having the one resource that working life chronically consumes: time. Chapter 3. The psychology of retirement spending. Why retirees spend less than they fear they will. There's a fascinating psychological dimension to this story that deserves its own discussion: the fear most people carry into retirement about spending. Many financially well-prepared retirees, people who have, by every mathematical measure, sufficient assets to fund a comfortable retirement, experience significant anxiety about spending in retirement. They worry about running out of money. They feel guilty about large discretionary expenditures. They default to frugality, even when frugality isn't necessary. This anxiety, while psychologically understandable, has a counterintuitive financial effect. It leads retirees to spend less than they planned and less than their assets support, which means more of their wealth stays invested and compounds, which means their net worth grows faster than their models predicted. The psychological caution that feels like a problem is actually a feature, when it doesn't prevent genuine quality of life. Research by the Employee Benefit Research Institute's Spending in Retirement survey found that a significant majority of retirees, approximately 60% in their study, reported spending less than they had budgeted in the first year of retirement, and 75% reported spending less in their second year than in their first. The primary driver was not financial hardship, but what the researchers termed psychological anchoring on scarcity, the deeply ingrained habit of saving and not spending that made large discretionary expenditures feel uncomfortable even when they were clearly affordable. This finding has an important implication for retirement planning that financial advisors are increasingly recognizing. The traditional 4% withdrawal rule, which was designed to ensure the portfolio doesn't run out of money over 30 years, is probably more conservative than necessary for most retirees because it assumes they'll actually withdraw 4% per year consistently. Most retirees, particularly in the first decade of retirement, withdraw significantly less than their sustainable
full rate, leaving the portfolio to continue compounding on a higher base. The implication? For working-age savers, this data is encouraging. You likely don't need to be as fearful about retirement spending as the standard planning models suggest. A well-built portfolio combined with Social Security, paid-off housing, and reduced work-related costs creates a financial environment where spending less than your income is often the natural outcome, not a result of sacrifice.
Chapter 4. The Unintended Consequence, the Great Wealth Transfer. There's a macroeconomic consequence to this pattern that is worth understanding because it has implications for the next generation that are already unfolding at scale. If retirees who entered retirement with significant savings are growing wealthier rather than drawing down, spending less than their portfolios generate, maintaining their investment allocations, eliminating housing debt, collecting optimized Social Security, then they are not spending down their estates as traditional models assume they would. Instead, they are accumulating wealth that will be transferred to the next generation, and the scale of this transfer is historically unprecedented. Cirilli Associates, a leading financial services research firm, projected in 2022 that approximately $84 trillion in assets would be transferred between generations in the United States over the following 25 years, the largest intergenerational wealth transfer in history. The majority of this transfer flows from the silent generation and baby boomers to millennials and Generation X. The driving mechanism is precisely what we've described. Retirees with significant assets growing wealthier during retirement rather than depleting their portfolios, leaving larger estates than either they or their children expected. For working-age people watching this, the wealth transfer data has a few implications worth thinking about. For some, it suggests a potential inheritance that financial planning should account for, not rely upon, but acknowledge. For others, it is a data point that reinforces the importance of building your own retirement assets rather than counting on a parental transfer that may or may not materialize in your lifetime. And for everyone, it frames the stakes of adequate retirement preparation. Wealth that is built and not consumed in retirement becomes the foundation for the next generation's financial starting point. Chapter 5. What this means for you right now. Lessons for working-age savers. Let's bring this back to the practical, because this episode is not just interesting as a financial phenomenon, it has specific, actionable implications for how you think about saving and retirement planning today. Lesson 1. The portfolio needs to stay partly in growth assets. One of the most common retirement planning mistakes is becoming too conservative with investment allocation the moment retirement arrives, shifting entirely to bonds and cash in an attempt to protect the portfolio. But if you live to 85 or 90 and you retire at 65, you have a 20 to 25-year investment horizon that can and should include a meaningful equity allocation for continued compound growth. The retirees who grow wealthier are generally those who maintain a portfolio that continues to generate real returns, which typically requires 40 to 60% in equities even in retirement. A portfolio that's 100% bonds or cash in 2026 might be earning 4 to 5% on fixed income, meaningful but likely just barely keeping pace with inflation. A balanced portfolio earns more, continues compounding, and produces the wealth growth in retirement that we've described. Research by Pfau and Kitces on the rising equity glide path in retirement, the strategy of actually increasing equity allocation through retirement rather than decreasing it, found that this approach produced superior outcomes in terms of portfolio longevity and legacy value in a majority of historical scenarios. The intuition, starting retirement with lower equity to reduce sequence of return risk, and gradually increasing equity through retirement as the portfolio proves its sustainability, often outperforms the traditional declining equity glide path. Lesson 2. Plan for less spending, not more.
The traditional pre-retirement planning model assumes you'll spend roughly 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement. The actual research suggests the number for many retirees is closer to 55 to 65% of pre-retirement income in the first decade, and it declines further from there until the late retirement healthcare cost increase. Planning for more than you'll need is conservative, but it can cause unnecessary anxiety and underspending during what could be the most active and enjoyable years of retirement. A more evidence-aligned approach builds a detailed picture of what your actual fixed costs will be in retirement: housing, ideally mortgage-free, healthcare, food, transportation, and plan around those, recognizing that the work-related expense categories will largely disappear. Then, build a discretionary budget on top for travel, hobbies, and family that reflects what you genuinely want to spend, rather than what a generic model says you should. Lesson 3. Social Security timing is one of the most important financial decisions you'll make. Every year you delay claiming Social Security between your full retirement age and 70 increases your monthly benefit by 8%, a guaranteed, inflation-adjusted 8% return that is extraordinarily difficult to match anywhere else. For a married couple where one partner has a higher earning history, the higher earner delaying to 70 while the lower earner claims earlier can produce hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional lifetime benefits. This decision deserves serious research and possibly the advice of a fee-only financial advisor who specializes in Social Security optimization. The action: visit ssa.gov and create or log into your Social Security account. Look up your projected benefit at different claiming ages. If you're within 10 years of retirement, the difference between claiming at 62, 67, and 70 in dollar terms should be part of every financial planning conversation you have.
Lesson 4. Paying off the mortgage before retirement is worth serious consideration. The data on mortgage-free home ownership in retirement is clear. It is one of the most powerful contributors to retirement financial security and the wealth growth patterns we've described. There are arguments on both sides. Keeping a low-rate mortgage while investing the difference has mathematical merit in strong market environments. But the combination of guaranteed expense elimination, psychological security, and the elimination of forced monthly cash flow from the portfolio makes mortgage freedom before retirement a financially and behaviorally sound goal for most people. Let me close with what I think is the most genuinely encouraging insight in this entire episode. The story of retirees growing wealthier after retirement is not a story about luck or about some financial magic accessible only to a few. It is the predictable, well-documented outcome of a specific set of behaviors pursued consistently over working years: saving meaningfully, staying invested, owning a home and paying it off, optimizing Social Security, and entering retirement with enough of a portfolio that compound growth can continue doing its work. Every episode in this series is building toward that outcome. The emergency fund, the Roth IRA, the index fund contributions, the employer match, the 843 rule of compounding, all of it is building the foundation that, if maintained across a working career, produces a retirement where the math works in your favor rather than against you. The retiree who grows wealthier isn't a unicorn, according to the research. They're the majority outcome for people who prepared adequately. They're the natural result of compound interest continuing to compound, work costs disappearing, housing debt being gone, and Social Security providing a reliable income floor. The market keeps running, the portfolio keeps growing, and the retiree who built it gets to watch. That's the payoff, and it's available to everyone who does the work during their earning years to build what's required to get there. Thanks for watching. If this gave you a new way of thinking about why retirement preparation matters, share it with someone who might need the motivation. Drop a comment telling me where you are on the journey: early career, mid-career, approaching retirement. Subscribe for the next one. See you there.